Okay, let's get to the entity boundary, which is for work is a very important part. I also want to show you one other feature of RDA that I haven't alluded to so far, and it's this thing here called Select Policy Statement. The various national libraries that use RDA have come out with certain policy decisions of their own on whether or not they apply certain options in RDA and under what conditions they do so. And Library and Archives Canada is one of them. Library of Congress Program for Cooperative Cataloging is another. If you select one of these, you will get along the right-hand side, you will get what the particular library has decided to do in terms of the particular RDA element that we're looking at on the left-hand side. Now, Library and Archives Canada has made no policy decisions in this area so far, but the Library of Congress has made 35 policy decisions, and as I go through, we're going to see on the right-hand side how the Library of Congress Program for Cooperative Cataloging feels about all of these various things. So, let's have a look at what's meant by entity boundary. Okay, so first of all, we have some general principles here. First one is important here. The relative boundary of the entity is determined by bibliographic and cultural conventions. Okay, so we're not talking about something that is universally held to be true in all cases, in all societies, in all contexts, and all libraries. We're talking, these are important issues, but they are also issues that have relevance to the particular community. Okay. They also point out an important thing. A static work, such as a published novel, may be realized by two or more expressions that differ in content without changing the intellectual or artistic conception of the work. That's important because we're not dealing with the distinction between two different manifestations where if there's any difference in the content, then we're looking at two different manifestations. It's possible for a novel to have significant differences in content, but which nonetheless retain the intellectual or artistic conception of the work. Think, for instance, of let's say you've got two different editions of a Victorian novel, one of which has an introduction by J. Hillis Miller and the other one has an introduction by Barbara Hardy. English lit people will notice that I'm dating myself dreadfully here. The introductions are going to be different, the annotations might be different, the editorial decisions of the editor may have been different. They may have been basing it on different original editions of the novel, and so you can't say that the two of them are equal. They're different expressions, but you could also, you would, I think, in most cases, argue that you are looking at a single work with two different expressions. So don't be foxed by the notion that there are differences in content. So, an expression of a static work, got that. An expression of a static work may be embodied by two or more manifestations without changing the content. A manifestation that carries the same content embodies the same expression and work. Okay. A difference in content between two expressions is necessary but insufficient as an indicator that each expression realizes a different work. So, for instance, an expression that is a translation of another expression is not usually described as a realization of a different work. Instead, both expressions are described as realizations of the same work. So you'll this is a very common cataloging policy decision, that if you've got Don Quixote in Spanish and Don Quixote in English, they're they're different languages, but they are the same work. Different expressions, but the same work. We've typically regarded translations as preserving what we call the identity of the literary unit. A representative expression may be used to establish the values that are compared to determine if an expression that is being described is a realization of a new work. Okay. A representative expression is an expression that is seen as canonical or standard to a work. An example that comes to my mind is Stanley Kubrick, the filmmaker. He insisted on a particular aspect ratio for his movies, and they were it was a distinctive aspect ratio. At least I believe so. I'm kind of talking through my hat here, but in such a case, the aspect ratio is an expression, is part of an expression, but it's a case where the aspect of the expression is intrinsic to what we consider what is considered to be the work. So you will find that you may find that the aspect ratio of Kubrick's The Shining or Eyes Wide Shut or 2001, the bibliographic record for the description of the work may include Kubrick's aspect ratio as a representative expression, which means that if you get a new version of Eyes Wide Shut, which is in VistaVision, sort of that long wide version, you might say that, okay, this is a new work because according to the aspect ratio of the representative expression, this is very, very different. So you may use that representative expression data as criteria whether to decide this new version of Eyes Wide Shut is a new work. Okay. Also, a common appellation may be used to collocate distinct works with common characteristics as a work group. This device can be used to harmonize the results of applying different work boundaries by different agents who create the metadata. So, let's say you've got let's take Alex's example of Lord of the Rings. You've got one library that absolutely insists that what we're dealing with is an aggregate work called Lord of the Rings, and another library that insists that what we're dealing with is three separate novels: Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. What you can do sometimes is set up a work group which will bring all of those together. Okay, and now we move to the classic feature of RDA, which is this sequence of yellow and gray. What RDA does is present a number of scenarios in yellow, or conditions, and then presents a condition option which you use, which you can or you may or may not use as you see fit. So let's say, for instance, you've got a new expression of the work, and there's a significant change in that the subject has changed, or some element subtype has changed significantly. The option that is presented is record a new instance of the work. So you and the Library of Congress says use cataloger's judgment. So you as the cataloger decide when this new edition of something comes along, and you say, hey, this is really, really different. Then you use your own judgment as to whether or not to treat it as a new work or an expression of the old work, a new expression of the old one. Condition: there is a significant difference in a value of a related agent of the work or an element subtype. So in this case, the person responsible has changed. The example that I would use would be William Strunk wrote a book called The Elements of Style, and it later was significantly enlarged and enhanced by the author E.B. White. So a new edition of The Elements of Style would have E.B. White prominently mentioned, as well as William Strunk. Do you treat this as a new work? The Library of Congress has this policy. Apply this option if there is a change in the authorized access point representing an agent that was used in constructing the authorized access point from the work. This may be a change from one agent to another, or a change of name for the agent. So if you're in the formation of access point, you are now using E.B. White as the author rather than William Strunk, then you are dealing with a new work. Okay. If there's a significant difference in the values of elements of an expression from the values of a representative expression of the work. So we've got, as I said before, we've got a new version of The Shining, which has an aspect ratio that is vastly different from the aspect ratio listed as represented in the representative expression. Let's see. What does the Library of Congress say? Cataloger's judgment. You'll see that quite frequently. So if you're an absolute Stanley Kubrick groupie, you might say absolutely, and if you don't care one way or the other, you might say, nah, it's too much work. Okay. What do you do if there's a significant difference in the expression which comes as a result of a change in genre or literary form? Okay, so you've got Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird. It's been adapted into a movie, and it's also been adapted into a stage play. Okay. What do you do when you get a copy of the stage play and you've got a bibliographic record for the novel by Harper Lee? Is it a new work, or is it a new expression of the old one? The condition option is record a new instance of the work. In other words, we treat the play adaptation as a different work from the novel by Harper Lee. The Library of Congress policy, apply the option. Okay, so something that used to be a novel and it's now a play, or it's now a movie, or it's now a ballet, or whatever, it's changed its genre or literary form. It is therefore a new work, according to the Library of Congress. Now we have another condition here. Relate the new instance of the work to the other work using transformation by genre of. Okay. So not only do you create a new work, but we have a relationship entity called transformation by genre of that we can use to link this new work to the old work. So I can create a relationship saying that this play that you're seeing on the screen is a transformation by genre of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Okay. Very, very precise terminology here. The Library of Congress practice, do not apply the option. Instead, relate the works as related work of work. So RDA has provided this incredibly rich vocabulary of ways in which a work can be transformed into another work, and the Library of Congress is saying, yeah, but frankly, all we really want to do is say that this is related to something else without going to the trouble of specifying. So for the Library of Congress, we'll say this play To Kill a Mockingbird is related to the novel, but we won't go to the trouble of finding the specific RDA relationship which says transformation by genre of. And you're going to find this all the way through the options here. What do you do if there's a significant difference in the values of an expression whose content differs from another realization of a work as the result of a change in the target audience? Let's say you've got a classic novel like Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and then you have a simplified expression of Great Expectations for people who are learning English as a second language. This is quite common in public libraries. You'll have expressions of classic or popular novels, but where the language has been significantly simplified so that ESL readers can read them. What do we do? The option listed is record a new instance of work. What's the Library of Congress's policy? Apply that for language versions of a serial work. So if you have a serial that was in English and then you have a version of it that is in Italian, then the Italian version is a new work. Okay. If the underlying serial work is transformed into a new serial work because of a change in the preferred title, new descriptions should be made of any language versions. Okay. Relate a new instance of work to the other by using work transformation by audience of. Do not apply the option. Just simply say related work. Okay. If there's a significant difference owing to editorial policy, so let's say a journal has become open access, or it has had a significant change in its peer review, or whatever. Library of Congress, apply the option, but don't apply the specialized relationship. Instead, just simply use related work. Okay. Now, as we go on, you're going to find a lot of these are related to serials, and you're going to learn why serials catalogers have first dibs on the aspirin in the medicine cabinet. So, what do you do if there's a significant change in style? Something that was the first expression of the work was presented as very serious. And then another edition presents it satirically. Okay, LCC agrees. It's a new work. Okay, only as a related work, though. Okay, if there's a difference in the extension plan, record. It becomes a new work if it records the if there's a difference in the extension plan. And then we've got a number of more specific instances. If it changes from integrating to successive, so something that used to be a website becomes a weblog, for instance, then it becomes a new work. If it changes from static to successive determinant, it becomes a new work. This is, I think I may have mentioned this as the case that was used in the library I worked in when we decided to turn our travel guides into serial records. We used to have a different bibliographic record for each annual edition of Frommer's Guide to Europe, Frommer's Guide to Italy, etc., etc. And then they changed them into serial records. So in that case, these would be considered to be a new work. And so on. If the work is an aggregating work and there's a difference in the aggregates, treat as a new work. So if you had an anthology of different essays, for instance, and then you had an updated version of that anthology with significantly different essays, then yes, you're dealing with a new work. If it's a diachronic work and there's a change in either the frequency or the ISSN, does it become a new work? Well, according to the LC Library of Congress, it becomes a new work if the ISSN changes, but not if the frequency changes. So something that used to be monthly changes to frequency, Library of Congress doesn't care. But if the ISSN changes, the International Standard Serial Number, then yes, they do. Okay. What happens if it changes its carrier type? According to the Library of Congress, it's a new work if it changes its media type as well. So if you had a journal that used to be in print and it's now in electronic form, then yes, it becomes a new work. If it was electronic and it used to be sent by email every month and has now become a remote access, then they're both in the same media category, and therefore they're considered to be the same work. So it depends on whether. So for the Library of Congress, if it changes from unmediated to electronic, then it's a new work. But if it changes from one form of electronic to another form of electronic, then it isn't. There's a significant difference in value of one or more characters of the plan for embodiment of the work over time. I'm not actually entirely sure what that means. If in a diachronic work, in other words a serial, if the preferred title changes, then it becomes a new work, according to the Library of Congress and according to standard cataloging practice, which is why changes in the title of a journal are an enormous pain in the neck. If there's a change which indicates a significant change of meaning or subject, it becomes a new work. If the journal, the diachronic work or journal, is published by a corporate body and the name of the corporate body changes, then it becomes a new work, meaning a new bibliographic record. Okay, so for recording, you could record an unstructured instance of the entity by simply writing the title down. We're not going to use that. We're going to use a structured description in terms of the access point for the work, and we'll also use an identifier. And then here are the elements. You can see, you can look at them all, or you can look at only the attributes or only the relationships, and you can search you can search. There we go. There we have aspect ratio of representative expression. Okay, sorry folks, this took a long time. I didn't expect it to take this long. I would guess you need another break. So take another break and then come back.